Every single day, you make thousands of decisions. What you eat, where you look, who you trust, what you buy, what you ignore. And you probably believe that every one of these choices comes from a conscious decision. From you. But what if I told you that many of your choices begin before you even realize you are making them? Before you feel the moment of deciding, your brain may already be preparing the next move. The most fascinating part, you still experience it as a choice you made yourself. In this video, we are going to uncover how your brain quietly influences your decisions, why you repeat behaviors you know are bad for you, and the hidden mechanism that can make you feel in control, even when your brain has already started moving in a certain direction. And at the end, we will look at a simple experiment that completely changed how scientists think about human choice. Imagine a normal morning. You wake up, you walk into the kitchen, you choose your favorite cup, you make coffee, you check your phone, you open a certain app. It all feels intentional. It feels like you are sitting behind the control panel of your own life. But your brain is constantly working in the background. Before you consciously think, what should I do next? Your brain is already analyzing information. Your memories, your emotions, your previous experiences, your environment. All of these signals are influencing what feels like a simple decision. The brain is not trying to control you. It is trying to protect you. Because thinking about every single action from zero would be exhausting. Imagine having to consciously think about every step of walking, every movement of your hand, every word before you speak. You would be overwhelmed. So the brain found a shortcut. It creates automatic patterns, and those patterns quietly guide your everyday life. Your brain is one of the most complex structures in the known universe. But complexity comes with a cost. The brain consumes enormous amounts of energy. So instead of carefully calculating every decision, it looks for patterns. It asks, have I seen this before? Have I done this before? Did this work last time? If the answer is yes, the brain creates a shortcut. This is why you can sometimes arrive home and barely remember the drive. Why you automatically reach for your phone when a notification appears. Why you choose the same food at the same restaurant without looking at the menu. Your brain is constantly trying to save energy. But this incredible ability has a hidden downside. Because the same system that helps you survive can also keep you trapped in patterns you never consciously chose. Think about walking through a forest. The first time you create a path, it is difficult. The grass is high. The direction is unclear. But every time you walk the same route, the path becomes easier. The same thing happens inside your brain. Every repeated behavior strengthens connections between neurons. The more often you repeat something, the easier it becomes for your brain to activate that same pattern again. At first, a habit requires effort. You have to think about it. But over time, the brain moves that behavior into a more automatic system. This is why changing habits can feel so difficult. You are not only fighting a behavior, you are fighting a pathway your brain has been strengthening for months or even years. But here is the interesting question. If your brain creates these automatic pathways, how many of your daily choices are truly new decisions? And how many are simply old patterns running in the background? Take your phone as an example. How many times today have you checked it without a real reason? Not because you needed information, not because someone asked you something important, but simply because your hand moved almost automatically. A small notification, a vibration, a moment of boredom. These tiny signals become triggers. The brain learns, when I feel this way, do this action. And then the cycle begins. A trigger, a behavior, a reward. This pattern is powerful because the brain does not only remember the reward itself. It remembers the possibility of a reward. Maybe the next message will be exciting. Maybe the next video will be interesting. Maybe something important is waiting. That uncertainty keeps your attention locked in. And this same mechanism is used by many modern technologies designed to keep you coming back. But the phone is only one example. Because the same automatic system influences much bigger decisions, including who you trust, who you avoid, and even what you believe about yourself. Your brain is not just reacting to the world. It is constantly predicting it. Every second, it uses your past experiences to guess what will happen next. This ability is extremely useful. It allows you to recognize danger, understand people faster, move through familiar environments without effort. But predictions can also become limitations. Imagine someone who was betrayed in the past. Years later, they meet a kind and trustworthy person. The new person has done nothing wrong. but the brain remembers. It searches for familiar warning signs, a delayed message, a different tone of voice, a small mistake. The brain is not always asking, is this person dangerous? Sometimes it is asking, does this feel similar to something I experienced before? And that difference can completely change the decisions we make. But this raises an even deeper question. If your brain uses the past to influence your present, what happens when your memories themselves are not as accurate as you think? What if the story you tell yourself about your past is actually being rewritten every time you remember it? This is where things become even more fascinating. Because in the next part, we will explore one of the most surprising discoveries in neuroscience. The experiment that showed your brain can begin preparing an action before you consciously experience the decision. And the results change the way scientists look at free will forever. But this raises an even deeper question. If your brain uses the past to influence your present, what happens when your memories themselves are not as accurate as you think? What if the story you tell yourself about your past is actually being rewritten every time you remember it? This is where things become even more fascinating. Because in the next part, we will explore one of the most surprising discoveries in neuroscience. The experiment that showed your brain can begin preparing an action before you consciously experience the decision. And the results change the way scientists look at free will forever. One of the most famous experiments exploring this idea was conducted by neuroscientist Benjamin Libet. The experiment itself was surprisingly simple. Participants were asked to move their finger whenever they wanted. There was no warning, no instruction, no external signal. They simply had to choose the moment themselves. While they performed the action, researchers recorded their brain activity. And what they discovered created a major scientific discussion. Before participants reported feeling, I have decided to move my finger, their brains already showed signs that the movement was being prepared. The brain appeared to begin the process before the person became consciously aware of the intention. Now, this does not mean science has proven that humans have no free will. The interpretation of these experiments is still debated. But the discovery changed one important idea. The conscious experience of making a decision may happen later than we assume. Sometimes, awareness arrives after the brain has already started preparing the next step. So why would the brain work this way? Because your brain is not simply reacting to the world. It is constantly predicting it. Every moment, your brain receives thousands of signals, sounds, images, emotions, body sensations, memories. If your brain had to analyze every single detail from the beginning every time, normal life would become impossible. Instead, it creates predictions. It uses your past experiences to estimate what is likely to happen next. When you recognize someone's face in a crowd, your brain does not calculate every single feature. It compares what it sees with stored patterns. When you walk through your own home in darkness, your brain already predicts where objects should be. When someone speaks, your brain begins understanding their meaning before the sentence is finished. This ability makes you faster, but it also creates a hidden problem. Sometimes your brain does not show you reality exactly as it is. Sometimes it shows you the version of reality it expects to see. Have you ever wondered why people repeat the same patterns even when they know those patterns are hurting them? The same relationship mistakes, the same emotional reactions, the same habits, the same decisions. The reason is that the brain loves familiarity. But familiarity does not always mean something is good. It only means something is known. And the brain often prefers what is predictable over what is uncertain. Imagine someone who grew up constantly feeling that they had to prove their value. Years later, they may find themselves attracted to situations where they have to prove themselves again. Not because they want pain, not because they consciously choose difficulty, but because the pattern feels familiar. The brain recognizes it. And what feels familiar can sometimes feel safer than something completely new. This is why changing your life is often harder than simply knowing what you should do. You are not only changing behavior, you are challenging old predictions your brain has built over years. Your brain also influences decisions by trying to reduce uncertainty. Imagine choosing between two restaurants. The decision is easy. Now imagine choosing between 10,000 restaurants. Suddenly, the choice becomes exhausting. Why? Because every option represents another possible future. Your brain starts creating questions. What if this one is better? What if I regret this? What if I missed the perfect option? The problem is not that you have too few choices. The problem is that your brain was never designed to compare unlimited possibilities forever. Eventually, it looks for a shortcut. It chooses something that feels acceptable, something familiar, something safe, not necessarily the perfect choice. This is why people often spend hours researching decisions, only to choose the option that simply feels right in the moment. But the brain has another powerful ability. It protects the story we tell ourselves. When we make a decision and later discover it was not the best one, something interesting happens. Instead of immediately admitting, "I was wrong," the brain often searches for another explanation. It was still a good choice. I actually needed it. It was worth it. Why? Because the brain dislikes conflict between our actions and our beliefs. This uncomfortable feeling is called cognitive dissonance, and it reveals something fascinating. The brain does not only help create our decisions, it also helps create the stories we tell ourselves about those decisions. But this leads to an even deeper mystery. If the brain can influence our choices, and then explain those choices, can we fully trust our own memories of why we do what we do? That is where the next part begins. Every time you remember something, the memory briefly becomes flexible again. Scientists call this process reconsolidation. Think of it like opening a document on your computer. The moment you open it, you can edit it. You might not intend to change anything, but once you save it, the updated version replaces the old one. Your memories work in a surprisingly similar way. A conversation with a friend, a documentary you watched, a new life experience. Even your current emotional state can subtly influence how the memory is stored again. This is one reason why two people can experience exactly the same event and remember it completely differently years later. Neither person is necessarily lying. Their brains simply rebuilt the memory in different ways over time, which raises an uncomfortable question. If your memories help shape your decisions, what happens when the memories themselves slowly change? Your memories are not just stories about the past. They are instructions for the future. Every experience teaches the brain something. Sometimes the lesson is useful. Touching fire is dangerous. Looking both ways before crossing the street keeps you safe. But emotional experiences teach lessons too. If trust once ended in betrayal, the brain remembers. If speaking up once led to embarrassment, the brain remembers. If taking a risk once brought success, the brain remembers that as well. The problem is that the brain rarely asks whether those lessons are still true today. It simply uses them to predict what will happen next. Without realizing it, you may be reacting to an old experience instead of the present moment. Imagine putting on a pair of colored glasses. After a few minutes, you barely notice them. The world simply looks normal. Your past experiences work in much the same way. They become invisible filters. They shape how you interpret conversations, how you judge people, how you react to criticism, how confident you feel. Two people can walk into the exact same situation and leave with completely different conclusions, not because reality was different, but because their brains interpreted the same information through different experiences. Your brain is always trying to answer one question. What does this situation remind me of? And very often, that answer influences your next decision before you consciously think about it. At this point, it might sound as though your past controls everything, but that is not what neuroscience tells us. One of the most remarkable discoveries about the brain is something called neuroplasticity. Your brain is constantly changing. Every new skill you learn, every meaningful conversation, every habit you repeat, every challenge you overcome leaves a physical mark inside your nervous system. New neural connections form. Existing pathways become stronger or weaker. Your brain is never completely finished. It is constantly adapting. This means your automatic behaviors are not permanent. They can change, not overnight, not through willpower alone, but through repetition, through experience, and through intentionally creating new patterns that eventually become familiar. This changes the way we should think about self-control. Most people believe change happens in one dramatic decision, a single moment where everything becomes different. But real change is usually much quieter. It happens every time you interrupt an automatic reaction, every time you pause before responding, every time you choose a different action than yesterday. Those moments may seem small, but your brain notices every one of them. Each repetition strengthens a new pathway, and slowly, the behavior that once felt difficult begins to feel natural. Which leads us to the final question. If your brain creates automatic habits, can you deliberately train it to make better decisions? The answer may be the most practical lesson in this entire video. After everything we have discovered, one question remains. If your brain creates automatic patterns, if your memories influence your choices, if your emotions can guide your decisions before you notice, then what does it mean to be in control? The answer is not about controlling every single thought. That would be impossible. Your brain will always create automatic reactions. That is how it keeps you alive. The goal is not to eliminate automatic thinking. The goal is to become aware of it. Because the moment you notice an automatic pattern, you create something incredibly powerful, a space between the impulse and the action. And inside that space, you have the possibility to choose. One of the simplest ways to regain control is also one of the most overlooked. Create a pause. A few seconds can completely change the way you respond. A notification appears. Your hand automatically reaches for your phone. Pause. Someone says something that makes you angry. Your first reaction is to respond immediately. Pause. You feel the urge to return to an old habit. Pause. This small moment does something important. It allows your conscious awareness to enter a process that was previously automatic. You are no longer just reacting. You are observing the reaction. And observation is where change begins. The brain cannot easily change a pattern that you never notice. But once you become aware of the pattern, you can start creating a different one. Many people believe successful change comes from stronger discipline. But neuroscience reveals something more practical. Your environment constantly communicates with your brain. The objects around you, the people around you, the information you consume, everything becomes a signal. If unhealthy choices are constantly visible, your brain receives constant reminders. If your phone is always within reach, checking it becomes easier. If distractions surround you, your attention follows them. But the opposite is also true. You can design your environment to support the person you want to become. Put the book where you can see it. Remove distractions before they become temptations. Make the good choice easier. Make the unwanted choice harder. You are not only changing your behavior, you are changing the signals your brain receives every day. Every habit follows a simple pattern. A signal, a behavior, a reward. The brain learns this cycle through repetition. For example, stress appears. The brain searches for relief. You open social media. You receive a small moment of distraction. The brain learns. This works. The next time stress appears, the same pathway activates. But the powerful thing about the brain is this. You do not always need to remove the signal. You can change the response. Stress appears. Instead of opening an app, you take a walk. You breathe. You write your thoughts down. At first, the new response feels unnatural because the old pathway is stronger. But every repetition sends a new message. This is the new way. Slowly, the brain adapts. The pathway becomes easier. And eventually, the new behavior starts to feel automatic. Maybe the biggest misunderstanding about the brain is this. People think automatic processes mean we have no control. But the opposite may be true. Understanding your brain gives you more control. A person who does not understand their patterns is controlled by them. A person who recognizes their patterns can begin changing them. Your brain is not your enemy. It is a prediction system trying to protect you using everything it has learned. Sometimes those lessons are useful. Sometimes they are outdated. Your job is not to fight your brain. Your job is to teach it. Because every repeated thought, every repeated action, every repeated choice is a vote for the person you are becoming. So now you know something important. Your brain influences your choices. It uses habits, memories, emotions, predictions. But there is one final mystery we have not answered. Where do your thoughts themselves come from? Before you decide, before you act, before you even notice an idea appearing, where does that thought begin? Are you creating your thoughts? Or are you simply becoming aware of thoughts your brain has already produced? This question goes even deeper than decision-making. And once you understand how thoughts are created, you may start looking at your own mind in a completely different way.